We welcome you back with the biggest news of the day. Kevin Durant reportedly has requested a trade from the Nets. The two-time NBA champ and Finals MVP has 4 years left on his deal with Brooklyn. Durant averaged nearly 30 points a game last season, his second in uniform with the Nets. Crazy, crazy news as we welcome in Jovan Buha of The Athletic. I want to start with you, Jovan. Are you surprised with
I was not surprised. I had heard last week that Kevin Durant wanted out of Brooklyn. I wasn't sure when that was going to come out or what teams he was interested in. So I do think Phoenix and Miami was a bit surprising to hear those two, although it does make sense when you kind of look at what contenders can move pieces around. But I was not that surprised. And that's why, to me, I know we'll get into it a bit, but the Kyrie Irving situation, most people thought it was dead when he opted in. But to me, I felt the Lakers still had a shot. And I think they have as good of a chance as ever now to get him.
I was gonna say there's still a little inkling of belief.
Yeah. I'm still surprised. I don't know what happened in Brooklyn. They did not win a playoff game. The new big three, including Ben Simmons and Kyrie and KD, did not play 1 minute together on the court, and it's already evaporating before our very eyes. I mean, it's really a thing where teams almost have to go season to season these days because you just don't know who wants out and who wants in because it's the NBA. It's almost July. It's a crazy time, and no crazier way to start it than with one of the game's top 2 or 3 players saying, I want out.
When it comes to Kevin Durant, you just kind of mentioned it, the Heat or the Suns, there is that conversation out there. Obviously, Devin Booker, no, off the table. Sun, where do you see him ending up?
I think Phoenix is the front runner right now. I think them figuring out some type of deal centered around DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, and multiple picks going back to Brooklyn. Because I don't see Phoenix giving up Devin Booker, and I don't see Miami giving up Bam Adebayo. And between those two, with the remaining assets, I think Phoenix has a little bit more to give up. But you never know. There could be a dark horse contender that enters the mix. Potentially the Lakers. From what I've heard, I don't think so. But you never know. And I think that's been the fun thing is now the fake trades and kind of figuring out where's
everyone.
I was going to say, don't do it to us, Jovan. Don't do it to us.
No trade machine stuff, for sure. The fascinating thing is Kevin Durant turns 34 in a couple months. And you're talking about involving him in a trade to teams where some of the best players are under 30. So a team will get a lot older, potentially, if they do trade a guy like Bam or Devin Booker. But then you get that guy. I mean, just so smooth. His skill set is such that he hasn't had a lot of high contact, compared to like a LeBron James. He's much more of a smooth, silky shooter. Obviously, he had the big injury a couple years ago with his Achilles, but now he's come back from that. Looks great. MVP candidate this past season, did not win a playoff game, and apparently he has had enough with Brooklyn. He wants new pastures.
No matter how great Kevin Durant is, and that he is, I also asked you on the podcast today that comes out tomorrow, the Lake Show podcast, do you have to factor in his age? No matter what team Kevin Durant goes to, whether it's Miami, whether it's Phoenix, whether it is another team, do they become an instant contender?
I think so. I think arguably the favorite, depending on kind of what they give up. But I look at Phoenix with KD, Devin Booker, and Chris Paul, and Jay Crowder would still be there potentially. And I think they showed last year that even when DeAndre Ayton was out, they were able to still win with JaVale McGee and Bismack Biyombo. I know McGee's going to Dallas right now, but I think the Phoenix Suns or the Miami Heat would at least become the conference favorite, if not the title favorite. But Kevin Durant is a top 2 or 3 player, and I think he's going to age gracefully.
I feel like the odds to win it all next season are changing every day. I mean, it's crazy. The Clippers, big reported signing a couple days ago that, John Wall is going to be joining them for only $6.5 million. All of a sudden, they're like the second favorite to win it all next season after the Golden State Warriors. Now, wherever KD ends up, do they pass the Clippers and the Warriors? I mean, it's just crazy how every day it's like a new favorite seems to emerge as to who should win the championship next June. Of course, a lot more still has to go into this. This KD thing could drag out for a little bit. You kind of feel like the NBA is in a holding pattern until everyone figures out where he is going to go. And before you get too excited about the Clippers, they still got to figure out, who's back for them. Is Kawhi healthy? Yeah. What's the deal with Paul George? I don't think I would think of them as the second favorite to win it all next season. But the John Wall signing, it's a good pickup for them for sure.
At the end of the day, too, no matter what it looks like on paper, you still have to go out and put it together 100%. And perform. Let's get back to the Lakers for a second. Jovan, you gave us a list of free agents you'd like to see the Lakers target. Anyone still out there left?
I think the name Nemanja Bjelica, the backup center from Golden State, he's a stretch 5, is someone that would, one, give them some size, because if you look at this roster, majority of the roster is under 6'9", aside from Damian Jones and Anthony Davis. So I do think they need at least one more big. Another name I like is Thomas Bryant, and then another one is Jeremy Lamb, who came off a serious injury last year, so didn't have the best year. But if you look at it, kind of his career, he is a traditional 3-and-D guy, and someone that has some size, 6'5", 6'6", with longer arms. And as Larry pointed out, the Lakers do have a lot of wings, but they don't have a lot of 3-and-D wings. It's kind of either or right now. So I think Jeremy Lamb is someone who might be able to split the difference a little bit.
That's kind of your focus, the 3-and-D with some size.
I think especially around stars, if you've seen the types of role players that fit around, just look at Golden State and Boston. All of their role players could either shoot and or defend. And I think the more those types of guys you have in your rotation, the deeper it is and the more versatile you are in a playoff setting. So I think if I'm the Lakers, that's kind of the types of guys I'm looking to put around LeBron and AD. And I think that they're on their way to that, but I still think, as Brez was saying earlier, the shooting to me is a bit of a concern, where none of these guys on paper are above average shooters. And I think you need at least a couple of them in your rotation.
I mean, you look at the last several NBA champions and that skill set and how important it is to get to the top. What about you?
I think TJ Warren will take veterans minimum of $2.5 million. Probably not, but I'm going to dream about that tonight. We'll see if it happens tomorrow. Maybe I can manifest it. I think you bring up some good points, good players. Otto Porter, I might add to your mix. A veteran who had a pretty productive season with Golden State. I think he might get more than a veterans minimum, but a lot of these guys might be looking for another chance with a different team. Bjelica kind of got some run with Golden State, not a ton, but I like the fact that he can indeed shoot, extend that court, and has good size. Like as Jovan said, not a ton of height on this Laker roster right now.
Look, I know you do your homework, and I know you look especially at that skill set of the signings that the Lakers have made. Your favorites?
Damian Jones and Juan Toscano Anderson, JTA for short. I think both guys, I think just looking at the Lakers roster going into free agency, they needed help in the front court. They're kind of loaded in the back court. Russ, Talon, Austin, Kendrick Nunn, they already had a lot of guards, but they needed some more forwards and bigs. And JTA is someone that I think will be able to fit in those small ball lineups that the Lakers deployed last year, those quick switching lineups. He can play the 4 or the 5. And then Damian Jones is someone who really broke out last year, and I know Brez was talking about that, but he's a mobile big man, rim running guy who can finish. He shot 70% from the floor last year, also a good rim protector who I think can play some mobile screen coverages. So I think those two signings to me really help bolster the front court. And then with the wing guys, I think it's just all about youth and upside with them. And can they get better shots in the Lakers system playing around stars than they did in their previous stops? I think that's going to be something to watch for.
Damian Jones, like I said earlier, strong finish last season. And he plays a 5. He is absolutely a 5. Maybe AD says, hey, don't forget me. I like playing the 4. So maybe, I'm not sure Damian Jones will start for this team. Still a lot to be determined there. We're still 3 months away from training camp, but maybe he allows AD to slide back to that 4 much more than maybe a Dwight Howard or DeAndre Jordan could have a year ago. We just didn't know what we were going to get from those guys. They're in their mid-30s. Damian Jones, 27 years old. He's still got a lot of NBA life ahead of him, especially if he plays like he did in the months of April and late March this past season.
I like hearing youth and versatility and mobility.
It's a lot different from a year ago.
Some other moves that happened around the league. This one prior to free agency. Between the Atlanta Hawks and the San Antonio Spurs, the Hawks received DeJounte Murray and Jock Landale. Spurs receive Danilo Gallinari and 3 future first-round picks and a 2025 first-round pick swap. I know Trae Young was happy about this.
He was. I think it was a good move from the Hawks. I don't know if it gets them to that next tier. I think, there was, to me, a little bit of fool's gold of them making the Eastern Conference Finals and just the collapse that Philly had and the bracket, in my opinion, kind of breaking right for Atlanta that one year. Because when you saw last year, they came back down to earth and, we're an 8 seed and lost in the first round to Miami. So I do think this probably puts them in the back end of that home court mix of like a 4 or 5 seed. But I don't know if you could put them on the level of a Milwaukee, a Miami, a Boston. I think those teams are just at a different level than them right now.
This is stunning. We're seeing Greg Popovich waving the white flag. We just don't see a lot of that. This is not Pop the coach who's won all those titles in San Antonio. This is Pop the GM saying, you know what, we're not going to compete. There's some really good talent in next year's NBA draft. It's hard to say guys planning to tank a whole year before the draft, but when you give up DeJounte Murray for 3 future first-rounders and a potential pick swap, you're definitely thinking years down the road. That's what Pop's doing here.
How much does that raise the value of Kevin Durant in that?
I think,
when you think of,
yeah, I mean, I think it raises it for sure. But I mean, I also would look at it as Gallo didn't have much value. That the Spurs are waiving him. He's going to be a free agent. So it essentially was 3 first-round picks for DeJounte. Whereas if I'm looking at Phoenix's package, Mikal Bridges alone is worth a first-round pick or 2. Same with DeAndre Ayton. So I would almost argue that if Phoenix is giving up Ayton and Bridges plus a pick or 2, that to me is a more valuable package than what the Spurs gave up. Or Atlanta gave up, rather.
For sure. So much going on. Back to the Lakers. A name that was crossed off the Lakers' wish list rather quickly was Mo Bamba, who reportedly has reached an agreement to return to the Magic on a 2-year deal worth $21 million. The big man averaged over 10 a game last season while shooting 38% from 3. With him being crossed off the list, do you believe the Lakers still have a need for a backup big man?
Yeah, I think so. I think you just need some extra size because right now, if AD goes down, knock on glass, Damian Jones is the only big on the, the only real big on the roster, and they can get by with LeBron and JTA and Stanley Johnson a bit, but I still think you need probably a second. Traditional center on this roster. But I really look at the need for more specifically a stretch big. And that's where I mentioned Bjelica because, the appeal of a guy like Mo Bamba is last year he almost averaged 2 blocks a game. And then he also shot 38% on 3. So he's a guy who can both space the floor around your stars and then also protect the paint, which is really valuable. It's a hard skill set to find. So I do think there is some value in the Lakers getting another shooting big who can, again, kind of play with AD, maybe in some 4-5 lineups, get AD to the power forward, but also kind of, Lakers need spacing again. I'm going to keep hammering that home. With the 3 stars they currently have, you need shooting to alleviate the paint being clogged.
That part.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the Lakers have 2 spots left if they want to get to the full 15. We haven't talked a lot about Max Christie, but he indeed was the 9th guy on their roster before heading into free agency today. They added 4 guys. So they're running out of space. If you allocate one of those spots to a big guy and one to a shooter, I think you've done some pretty good work. Now, there's no Klay Thompsons or Steph Curry sitting out there, especially when it comes to shooting.
There might be someone close.
Well, yeah, there could be. I feel like we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. Might be heading west, you could say. But the Lakers do, have all of a sudden added to their roster a lot just in the last week by buying into the second round. Pretty high too, Jovan. I was impressed. They got all the way up to 35. And again, adding 4 guys today. That roster's filling up.
I didn't mean to rush us out of the B block. Sorry, but here we go. Straight ahead, Larry Coon joins us to discuss if the wild scenario of both KD and Kyrie joining the Lakers is possible. You don't want to miss it. Plus, Nikola Jokic and Bradley Beal signed major max extensions to stay with their current teams. We're breaking down all the action after the break.
Is with the Nets. That is now over. We don't 100% know where KD is with Kyrie Irving. The league doesn't know. But it has been floated to me by executives that I'm sorry much loath to say it.
I can't. Don't do it.
That if they were be kept together, that the Lakers would potentially have a package that you could trade for both of them.
We cut off the energy of our friend Richard Jefferson, who basically threw up his arms and screamed, "Do it, do it, do it." We welcome back in Larry Coon, our NBA salary cap guru. You just heard Brian Windhorst. Can this get done? How do we make it happen? KD, Kyrie in a Lakers uniform.
Okay, and I know Brez wants to know how Lou Dort can become a Laker in that deal also.
Yes.
That too.
We'll get to
$21
that.
million
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, if you're talking KD and Kyrie.
And, yes.
Coming, and. That's an and. Okay, I'm going to throw out a number, $81 million. That's what the 2 of them make combined.
And we only had we, as in I'm part of the team. Lakers only had $6.5 million to start.
To spend on a free agent.
81 and a half million.
Also, coincidentally, Allie's annual salary here at Spectrum Sports. So,
I know.
Let's not tell the world.
I want her agent.
What else? 81 million. I mean, that's how do you get them over here to LA? Like, what do you see? What do you envision?
It's not impossible mathematically.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's 2 players.
Well, yeah, AD and LeBron, right? Oh. Yeah, so
sure that's
okay,
gonna
they've got to send out $65 million just to make it work under the rules.
Okay.
Forget about convincing Sean Marks that it makes sense and he's willing to pull the trigger. But for it to even pass muster, they have to send out $65 million. Okay. The problem with the Lakers is that they're so top heavy. We were talking about that. 3 guys up at the top, the rest are making chump change. And there's nobody in the middle to really throw into a deal to make it worthwhile to another GM. So are you looking at AD plus Russ? Okay, you can get up there. So AD is at 38, Russ is at 47, but Russ is not a high value contract at $47 million, even in the last year. So now you're talking about a 3rd team and maybe even a 4th team, because Sean Marks is not going to want Russ, I would imagine. So,
Is that what you mean by he's not a high value contract?
Right.
The stats don't back up the dollars in your mind.
he is not worth $47 million for what he brings to the court currently. Correct.
Okay, now if a 3rd team is involved, that could make this thing a little bit more complicated, a little bit more protracted. If the Lakers are going to try to get both these guys, which is definitely, as you mentioned, a big order, it's going to take some time. This is not going to happen
Tomorrow.
on the morning of July 1st. I think we're safe with saying that.
But well, first of all, trades can't happen until July 6th. But
You can agree to them, of course,
yeah, in principle.
in principle.
But this is the kind of thing that takes its time percolating. They'll bring in the 3rd team, they'll bring in the 4th team, they'll talk to the league. The league will say prank call or hang up before they call back a couple of times to convince them, no, we're really trying to do this, I swear. We're not pranking you. That might take place more toward the end of July, I would think. I would say that this would take a little bit of time to put together after the moratorium. But the problem is, I think the rest of the league has pretty much hit the pause button until everything with KD shakes loose.
He's the domino. He's the big
He is.
domino. Do you still think that the Lakers are in the Kyrie Irving sweepstakes?
I think they are. Now, we're just talking Kyrie by himself. Jovan on our podcast thought it was about 60 or 70% that he would end up with the Lakers. I'm going to be a little more conservative. Good news for Laker fans. The front office historically has made big trades happen. Just Anthony Davis, just a few short years ago. Pau Gasol in 2008, really making Kobe happier with the franchise. And why not? They went on to win 2 championships together. So the Laker front office has a knack for unveiling big trades. It's just, the Lakers, like Larry mentioned, they don't have a ton of guys making middle money or young talent besides THT making decent money that you can push off in a trade to make the math work. The NBA doesn't like when you acquire a $37 million player, aka Kyrie, and send out $2 million. Yeah, you can't do that. There's very few examples where you can do that. So what the Lakers have to send out over $30 million in contracts, and I'm not sure that the Nets want what the Lakers have, which is mostly established veteran players making big bucks.
It's realistic, though.
Well,
Kyrie Irving alone.
define realistic.
Larry went deep thought there for a second. And why do you say it that way?
Well, because when you look at what Sean Marks, the Nets GM, is going to want, even for Kyrie by himself, right? He's going to want to maximize this.
What would that look like?
Well, when you look at, you want draft assets, right?
Okay.
For one thing.
Yep.
And especially if somebody's going to take on Russ, right? Whoever sends out Russ, the Lakers in this case, they have to add to it with some assets. That's usually draft picks. All of the Lakers' draft picks, they're in New Orleans. So you're talking 27, 28, 29. You can't send out all 3. You can send out 27 and 29. Maybe by then the Lakers are kind of back on the bottom end of the roller coaster, and those picks will be good. And a team like Brooklyn can wait until those picks mature and are worth a lot. Maybe that could happen, but it seems kind of far-fetched to me, to be honest.
Yeah, if you're Brooklyn, you probably want a pretty immediate return on this investment, aka young players who are not all-stars yet, but maybe there's promise there and they don't make a ton of money, or draft picks, for sure. Is 27 and 29 too far away for the Brooklyn Nets time horizon? Do they want someone in 23 and 25, from a different team that has these available assets? We don't know. We'll just have to surmise that the Lakers will be talking to try to get Kyrie over here.
And I don't know if it's a seller's market or a buyer's market, really, for Kyrie.
What do you mean by that? Like what?
I mean, are people bidding for him and driving up the price?
What's the demand?
Or is he looking to see who's willing to take Kyrie? Anyone?
I'll tell you the definition of realistic I don't like. When you are realistic with me about this opportunity happening. We appreciate you. You are great. Thanks so much for stopping by with us today. Coming up next on Access, we will bid farewell to Malik Monk by looking back at his top 10 plays as a Laker. You don't want to miss it.